I'm sure lots of you have dealt with sibling rivalry. When you have a sibling, you're just going to have to deal with them some issues. It's completely normal, you know. Though there are instances where the issues with your siblings are a hell of a lot worse than the average family. For me, my issues with my brother Blake fell into an extreme category. I hated that the issues with my brother are cropping up when I'm engaged to be married. The wedding is going to be in a few months, but with how my brother's treating my fiancé, I don't know how the wedding is even going to go. For most of you listening to this, or all of you really, you're probably confused, so I should start at the beginning where my issues started. Well, my brother Blake and we were raised in a middle-class family. There were some struggles, especially during periods of economic hardship, but for the most part we stuck together. When I was a kid, or teenager I should say, I did get an opportunity to study at a boarding school across the country. It was all paid for, so my parents encouraged me to go. When my brother learned that I was going, I think a part of him felt pretty abandoned. I tried with my best to tell him that we could talk all the time on the phone and email each other, but it did not seem to help my brother at all. Once I was at school, it was hard to keep up with my brother and how he was doing, except for what my parents told me, of course. They tried to hide a lot from me because they did not want to worry me. Come to find out that while I was away at school, my brother ended up getting into a lot of trouble. He took up with a bunch of other teenagers in the city, causing crime, and they were committing all sorts of crimes like mischief and property damage, robbery. Nothing huge, but if you add it together, then it gets bad. When someone in the group ended up stabbing someone, it was that my brother realized he was in too deep. So my brother ended up going to juvie because he was in the area, and this was basically what my parents told me at the time. He spent his time in juvie, and once he got out, he ended up deciding to go off to Europe. See, our grandmother was a European citizen, and our mother was born there. This enabled us to travel to Europe as well, and after filling out some paperwork, my brother decided to go overseas because he wanted to get away. After my brother left, the two of us did not talk very much. We would talk on the phone and online a few times a month, but it was not frequent. I miss my brother, so did my parents. They said that he was better off overseas because he was keeping him out of trouble. Well, honestly, I'd never asked my brother about the time he spent with those groups of teenagers causing problems across the city. It was a touchy subject, and my parents only knew so much because there was a lot that my brother kept from them. While my brother was dealing with all the crap in his life, I moved forward with mine. I graduated and then came back home to go to State University, to major in healthcare administration. Healthcare was always something I was interested in, and there were always healthcare jobs that were out there, and it made sense for me to make this a career path. It was honestly difficult not to think about my brother. He and I were once thick as thieves, but now the two of us were mostly strangers. If any of you reading this have siblings, this is probably something you have found that is common. No matter how close you might be as children, at some point while you begin to grow up, the two of you might start to drift apart. Well, my brother would visit at least once a year, but it was only for a few days. For the most part, it was like he still wasn't here. He offered to have me visit him, and I almost took him up on it, but then I got a job. Work was something I did want to focus on and make an important part of my life. It's what would help me live a comfortable life. Eventually, I was able to move on and start to live my life despite my brother living overseas, and barely having a relationship with me or my parents. After graduating from college and starting a job, I met Jordan. He was a few years younger than me, but already had his life together. Jordan had gone to a trade school and was working full-time in a trade. We met on a dating app because that was just how modern dating is right now. Using a data app, well, it's the norm. And I didn't see any problem with it, and from the moment we went on the first date, there was chemistry between the two of us that I simply could not deny. As soon as we finished the date, I couldn't wait to go on another one with him. The two of us were dating exclusively right now. My parents met him and were thrilled with Jordan, and they said he was a good match with me and was a nice man overall. Jordan had spent most of his life in foster care and then lived with his aunt for some time, so he didn't have much close family to speak of. He became very close to my parents, much to my amazement, and I told Jordan about my brother. He was still overseas but was planning on finally coming back home after all this time, and Jordan was excited to meet him. It was going to be a bit of a wait, like I said, because my brother was still overseas. The job he worked over there was going to let him transition to a job over in our city, so my brother would be able to work back in the States while remaining very close to us. I was very nervous when my brother told me on his way back to the States, and all I wanted for was my brother Blake and Jordan to get along. They were both important to me in different ways. I mean, really, besides my parents, they were the most important people in general. Jordan and I were waiting at my parents' house when they left to pick Blake up from the airport. So I told him to calm down, it was going to be okay. Until my brother walked in. The moment my brother saw Jordan, his face fell, and he started cursing him out. Jordan looked like a deer caught in headlights, and all my parents and I could do was stand there, confused as to why this was happening right now. I mean, it made no sense why my brother would be so rude to Jordan. The two of them have never met, or at least I thought this was the case. It seemed like from that interaction there was some kind of past between them. Jordan and I eventually left, and my parents did not try to stop us. Before we left, they tried to make excuses for my brother and say that my brother took time to warm up people, but that we should let bygones be bygones. Eventually, he would come to accept the relationship because he loves me and wanted me to be happy. When I reached out to my brother about why he did not seem to like my fiancé, all Blake would say was that I should ask Jordan about it. He was the one who betrayed him. After all, I had no idea what any of this meant. The more I pressed my brother for information, the more he just clamped up and refused to tell me anything, and it ended up with him eventually hanging up on me. This meant I had to ask Jordan what the heck is going on, but he had been strangely quiet and distant since we got home from my parents that day. I gave him about a day or so before I sat him down after we both were home from work. "We have to talk," I tell him, and he panicked with the expression on his face and made me feel sad for him in a way. "It's nothing bad, Jordan. I just need to know what's going on between you and my brother." For a few minutes, Jordan did not say anything. Well, except for the name, he repeated Kelsey, Kelsey, Kelsey. And I kept looking at him. However, he didn't say anything else to my dismay except for Kelsey. All I could do was sit there and wait for him to finally tell me what's going on, and eventually, oh yeah, he told me. He told me what was going on. He and my brother knew each other back when they were teenagers. Blake and Jordan were running around in the same little squad, that very squad that caused all those issues in the city. I asked him how it started. The two of them just fell into some trouble, though Jordan had no idea what my brother's reasons were. For Jordan, it was all about having something because he didn't have anything. It didn't seem like much trouble at first. But then the stabbing happened. Somebody actually got hurt. Yep. To save himself, my fiancé sold the group out to cops. He became an informant, so to speak, and this is what led my brother to going to juvie. He asked me if I blamed him, and I told Jordan that of course I didn't blame him. My fiancé, did what he had to do to save himself. It explained why my brother hated him so much, but I don't know why Blake held on to the grudge. He had made his whole life so much better over the years, and I told Jordan that we had done what was in the past. I tried to get the two out of them to talk, at least speak, but, Blake, about everything, he just kept pushing me away. Honestly, it's hard to say what's going to happen now that all this is out in the open. My parents ended up learning the truth. They didn't seem to want to take sides, and we should try to let it go was basically what my mom and dad said. I understand why they wanted me to do this, but it was still hard to hear. All I could do was nod and try to tell Blake that I still wanted him to be a part of my life. I wish I knew why my parents were always willing to take his side. While I said I understood their position, it made me mad the more I thought about it. Why did my parents allow my brother to walk all over them and me? He had no right to still hold a grudge against me. Before my brother came back to the States, my parents were thrilled with my fiancé, and now they pulled away as if they didn't want my brother to know that they had gotten close to my fiancé. So, as you can see, There are a lot of issues going on between my brother right now. I hope that we'll be able to work past this at some point, but I'm doubtful at this moment in time. At least Jordan is sticking by my side. He feels guilty, however. He did not need to feel like this because both of them were teenagers. I'm just so confused. I don't know how to mend the things between my brother and my fiancé. But I can't keep on going like this with Blake giving me and Jordan cold shoulder. And now it seems like my parents are with Blake. I don't know what to do, so if you guys can suggest me anything, I would appreciate it. I don't know when or if I'll update this again. Well, if I do update soon, I hope it'll be a good one rather than a bad one. All I want is for my family to attend my wedding. Is that so much to ask for? Update number 1. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I thought my new update would be about my wedding and if I managed to convince Blake to go. However, this is not what I came here to update you on. While my fiancé was at work one day, I was working at home. My brother Blake stopped by. He texted me saying that he was outside. Once I saw the text, I ran to the door and invited him inside. It had been a while since my brother reached out to me so casually, and I hoped that now he was here, we would be able to make amends. The two of us sat down at the kitchen table, and I asked Blake how he was doing, and Blake said that he was doing very poorly. Since learning I was engaged to Jordan, it was all he could think about, and he felt disgusted and hurt that the man who ruined his life was going to be a part of the family. A part of his sister's life? I tried to explain to him that sometimes it's best just to let things go, or at least to work past it, you know? He shouted that he can't do that. Also, Blake seemed convinced that Jordan was involved with me just to mess Blake up. This could not be true because Jordan never even realized Blake was my brother until after they met. However, my brother would not see the reason. He then told me something that shocked me. Blake wanted to frame Jordan for a crime so he could suffer in jail for some time. Not only that, but he wanted me to help. I was in shock and could only sit there as my brother tried to convince me. Eventually, I told my brother that he had to leave. Blake agreed, but said that he was not going to let this go, and once he left, I sat there in absolute shock. How could my brother want to go this far? I need to convince him not to do this, but he was very stubborn, so it might be hard to get him to change his mind after all. If he would not change his mind, then I was going to go to my parents and tell them what was up. They would be the only ones to convince my brother that the path he was on was not a good one, and of course they might not believe me, but I have evidence. While my brother was talking to me, I decided to record the conversation just for the hell of it. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and now I realized it was a very good idea. It was the only way to convince my parents of how my brother was in the wrong and get them to talk to my brother and not go down this path. The one person I was not going to say anything to was Jordan yet. He might get very upset, which was the last thing I wanted to do. I'm planning on stopping by my parents this weekend, and my brother has been staying there with them, so it'll be a good chance to confront him. I'll update you guys once I have any developments of the whole thing. Update number 2. It's been a few days since my last update, and it's been difficult to try to type this update because of how much anger and hurt I've been facing since confronting my brother and my parents with the recording. If you're thinking it did not go well, then you might be right. But let me start from the beginning. When I got there, I dropped by under the guise of wanting to talk to my parents about the wedding, which I did. It was giving them some updates about it before bringing up Blake and his issues with my fiancé. My parents were a little uneasy, but they tell me to just ride it all out. Eventually, it'll work out in the end, and I just needed to hope for the best, so I told Mom and Dad about what Blake has talked to me about. He felt like Jordan was just using me so that I would do what it was to help him frame Jordan for a crime. This way, Jordan would know exactly what Blake had gone through. When I tell my parents this, they said that I might have just misunderstood, so I pulled out my phone and started to play the recording for them. From start to finish, they just stared ahead and refused to look at me. I didn't like how this was going, but I waited until the recording was over. Once it was done, I asked my parents if they would be willing to talk to Blake on my behalf because it didn't seem like it would go far if it came from me. The first words out of my parents' mouths were that I should not hold a grudge, and my brother did not mean it, and I should just let it go. Was what my brother said bad? Yes, but apparently he didn't mean it. I've known my brother since, well, he was born, obviously. When he was serious, I was able to tell when he was being so, and the same went for when he was absolutely joking. What he told me the other day was not from somebody who was joking. Rather, it was from somebody who was completely serious and wanted to get revenge on somebody who, well, they thought had wronged him in some sort of way. Well, after the shock started to wear off, I tell my parents this, and I said that my brother was not joking. He needs to get a wake-up call, and this is the best coming from my parents, you know. Well, I truly believed that this would be able to set him right. Still, they tried to straight up insist that I needed to let it go. Eventually, I got sick of what they were saying, and I just decided to leave. Before I left, I told my parents that I did not want anything to do with them right now, and the same went for my brother. I thought that was the right thing to do because I was just mad with all three of them, and like I got how my brother was being stupid about the whole thing, but my parents turning a blind eye to all of it hurt even more. It was like they have decided that no matter what they have to just support Blake. When I got home, I decided it was time to tell Jordan everything. He wasn't as upset as I thought he was. If anything, he was more worried about me. Now, I'm just looking forward and preparing for my wedding, hoping and praying that Blake doesn't create any further problems for the two of us. Well, I'll update you guys. Update number 3. I never thought that I would be back here updating so suddenly, but my brother Blake has taken it to a new level. A level I thought that he would never take it to, so it's been a few weeks since my last update, and we were successfully cutting Blake and my parents off all the while, until this incident. Jordan and me had gone out on a date to take our mind off things. We then went for a walk in the park. My brother must have been following us because suddenly he shows up and cuts us off. He starts to shout at us, telling Jordan that he wasn't going to allow him to ruin our family. When I asked my brother how he knew we were here, he just casually tells me that he had followed us, and honestly, the two of us were shocked that he just admitted to that, and I told my brother that he had to get out of there and just leave us alone, but he said he wasn't going to do that. Blake ended up trying to beat Jordan up, and I tried to get them to stop, but I ended up being pushed to the ground. Jordan saw red when I was pushed to the ground. However, he kept his head up, which is what I was happy about. Still, the two of them were ready to start fighting, and I begged Blake to leave us alone. But he threw the first punch, and while Jordan was trying to subdue him, I called the police because I didn't want this to get out of hand. The result was my brother being arrested and the two of us going to the hospital and just finally going to the station. There wasn't much damage. I was a little bruised, and at the same went for Jordan. Luckily, he had been able to subdue my brother to an extent, and guys, I just apologized to Jordan about what Blake had done, but he assured me that he did not blame me at all. If Blake wasn't able to forgive him, then that's on him. It was just something he was going to have to deal with for the long run. Honestly, there was no going back after this. When my parents found out what my brother did, they went as far as to bail him out. If I said I couldn't believe it, it would be a lie. I did believe that they would do that to me because, well, it was fitting for them. They had made it crystal clear that they wanted to sweep everything under the rug because this was the easiest thing to do. If they pretended that nothing was wrong, then there wasn't a problem. It made no sense, and of course, but by this point I was truly done. Jason and I are going to have to discuss what we are going to do at some point, and I mean soon. The reason for this is staying here around my family is not helping us at all. The only thing we can do is consider leaving, but I'm not sure about that right now. I'll probably update you guys on whatever we decide. If Jordan and I do decide to move on, then I'll let you know. At this point, it seems like it's pretty likely. Final update. Update number 4. Hey guys, it's been a month since my previous update, and I thought I might just let you guys know about the situation right now. This will probably be it. So after the whole fiasco with the police and my brother just getting bailed out, I decided that I needed to go a step further because it did not sit right with me that my brother could eventually just go back to Europe without a care in the world. After doing some digging, I was able to find this place of employment that he worked at. Jordan and I typed up a message with evidence of what my brother had done in his past as well as what he's currently been trying to do. All we had to do was wait, and it wasn't long wait. Thankfully, the company said they were going to look further into the accusations and see if they warranted a firing. Eventually, they did get back to us and my brother was let go. I found this out one evening when my brother called me angry about what happened. Jordan once told me their favoritism might have something to do with finances. During this call, my parents pretty much admitted my brother had been funding their lifestyle for years, and he had a good-paying job in Europe, and I realize now the more successful my brother became, the better off my parents were. It was no wonder why they kept supporting him. Well, he was their meal ticket, and if they failed to support him, then their lifestyle would be over. I don't know why I'd never seen it before. Jordan told me it wasn't my fault, and for the most part, I was focused on my job and then my relationship with him. Why would I concern myself with my parents and their financial situation if they weren't struggling? If they needed help, they would ask me, but they didn't ask. So this wasn't something I had to worry about at all. My parents had no idea they were going to be able to afford anything anymore. This confirmed to me that my brother has been paying their way. I flat out asked them how much my brother's been sending them, and the two of them denied it, but from the way they sputtered, it was clear he was giving them a decent amount. Well, chances are big that my parents won't be able to afford their mortgage in the upcoming months, but this is their bed and they have to lie in it. At least by the time this happens, Jordan and I will be long gone from here, away from all the chaos, and finally able to get married and start a new life. At last, I would like to say thank you for the constant support throughout this whole messed up fight against my family. Has anybody else been through something similar? Let me know what you did about it.